Let's go live now to Los Angeles to speak to Associate Attorney at the Bloom Firm Mary Fitilchyan. Mary, thank you so much for your time with me this evening. Mary,
Of course, thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you on. How are UK authorities like Thames Valley Police and the Crown Prosecution Service approaching this case, in your opinion?
I believe that the request and the pressure on former Prince Andrew to testify and to basically be very transparent about any information that he knows is the right approach. It's the approach that we should have over here in the States, and it's something that is the only right way to handle this information without holding people accountable, without demanding truthfulness and testimony, which is, I think, the cornerstone of any legal proceeding or legal system. Then you can't have true justice and accountability.
How serious are the allegations that Andrew shared confidential UK trade documents with Jeffrey Epstein? And what could this mean legally for Andrew?
I mean, they're serious allegations. I think they are different allegations than any allegations that he may have had with any of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, but they certainly are very serious. I think that they vindicate Virginia Giuffre's allegations against him as well, that he was engaging in potential different illegal activities at the same time that he may have also been engaging in sexual abuse. So again, it just stands to be found out when he does go and do his testimony, which is something that he definitely should do.
And Mary, Epstein survivors have consistently expressed that they want justice focused on the abuse itself. How frustrating is it that the current investigation focuses on sharing confidential documents rather than the alleged direct abuse? You mentioned Virginia Giuffre there. Sadly, she's no longer with us, but this must be an extremely frustrating time for those survivors and you as a lawyer for them.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it is really indicative of the fact that we have sometimes lost sight of what is important at the heart of these files, and it is the survivors. It is what they went through. I've also seen some instances where there are certain portions of the files that are either being altered or created, like fake different types of files that are being circulated to promote more outrage. But I think that it really highlights that it's sometimes not enough to just believe survivors and to just believe that the abuse they went through is enough. The abuse they went through is horrendous and unacceptable, and it is enough to be absolutely outraged without having to create other allegations. And certainly, you know, these allegations against Prince Andrew are not created by any sense. They are found out through information that's being released. But again, the heart of this issue is the survivors. It is the abuse they suffered, and it is ultimately seeking justice for them. And I think that as long as we hold that at the forefront of what our goals are, hopefully justice can be somewhere in the future for them.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier to me, actually, Mary, that Andrew should testify in court. Do you think he actually will? And do you think that this will give the survivors and the victims of Jeffrey Epstein any closure? Because I think all people are looking for right now, from my understanding, is the truth.
Yeah, I absolutely think that he should. As to whether he will or not, that remains to be seen. I don't know, but I do know that if there is a legal request for him to testify, then that is something that he should abide by. Testimony, again, like I mentioned, is the cornerstone of any legal system. For example, we just had Ghislaine Maxwell testify, or lack thereof, I should say, in the United States, because she came and she pled the fifth and then is trying to bargain testimony for clemency. And in my personal opinion, actions like that are unacceptable. Testimony is how you do fact-finding and truth-finding. And I think with Epstein, it's become abundantly apparent that we need to do a lot of truth-finding. So if there is a request from former Prince Andrew to testify, then that is his moral duty, I think, to do so, as well as potentially his legal duty.
And Mary, you are a lawyer representing Epstein's victims. What actually happens next? Because we've had this deluge of Epstein files that have come out. People have gone through all the details. And I was just wondering, what actually comes next? Do you think more convictions will come next? Will justice happen?
Well, what comes next is really uncovering who Epstein's co-conspirators were. Recently, Congress went through the unredacted versions of the files, which is different than what the DOJ actually presented to the public. And they revealed the names of 6 potential co-conspirators to the public. So it's really actions like that that help us as attorneys for the survivors determine what our next steps are. Of course, we're looking into and researching and considering all other potential legal avenues and potential avenues for justice for our clients. But it really is, I think this is such a unique scenario where we are really so reliant on our institutions and our government to reveal sensitive and important information to us as representatives of the survivors and to the survivors themselves. And it really is dependent on what those institutions reveal to us that determines what next step we take. So as it is right now with the names of the potential co-conspirators that have been released, of course, we're researching and seeing if there's any avenues for justice there. But we're closely following what new information is revealed in these files and in potentially the unredacted versions that Congress is reviewing.
And Mary, Virginia law, that bill was put forward a little bit earlier this week. We saw Chuck Schumer, the Democrat, along with some of the Epstein survivors, introducing Virginia's law. It's got a lot of support behind it. But how can it actually work in reality?
So Virginia's law is actually modeled after a law that passed in 2022 in New York called the Adult Survivors Act. And essentially what Virginia's law does is it opens up a time period for people to file civil claims of sexual abuse or sexual harassment or sex trafficking against their abusers for claims that may have expired. There's this concept, something called the statute of limitations. It just means a time period that you have to bring your claims. And unfortunately, research has shown us that people who were abused as children or early on in their life may not be aware of the abuse or may not be ready to talk about that abuse until well into their middle ages or even later on in their life. So in order to allow people to get justice for suffering abuse from their harassers, Congress has introduced this law that will essentially federally open up the statute of limitations for people to bring sex trafficking claims. Like I mentioned, that law, Virginia's law, is modeled off of a law that was introduced in New York in 2022. And there was a lot of success with that law in New York in 2022. I know over 1,000 people brought claims. I'm not sure, obviously, how all of them turned out, but it's really imperative to allow victims to get justice without these sort of like red tape bars of statute of limitations. And especially when you're talking about something so sensitive like child sexual abuse or sex trafficking, I think a statute of limitation can really be such an arbitrary bar to their justice and to getting accountability for that victim. So removing it by introducing Virginia's law is, I think, such a monumental moment for our Congress to do. And hopefully it does get passed and it allows victims to seek that justice that they so deserve.
Mary Fitilchyan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.